Welcome to the Thrive Master Show. On this episode, we have Phil Treadwell. Phil's a mortgage marketing expert. He's a host of the podcast Mortgage Marketing Expert. He's also a national director at Thrive Mortgage. You can find more information about him at philtreadwell.com.
Glad to have you on the Thrive Master Show, Phil.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. The first question is, if you had to take all the wisdom and the success you've acquired and had to do a master class, what would it be on?
Probably on mentorship. Almost every business success that I have, that I've had or achieved has been a direct relation to a coach or mentor that's taken their experience and imparted it to me in wisdom. And so I would say that, most things are learnable, teachable, and duplicatable. And so we have to be good students. And at some point, I think that we have to pivot from just being students to actually executing. And, something I say a lot is ideas are good, plans are better, but it's execution is all that matters. And so, we've got to learn how to do that. And sometimes that's learning from people that have failed, failing ourselves. And so if I had to do a master class, maybe it's a more broader sense on mindset or execution, but mentorship is something that's been a huge part of any business success that I've had.
Wonderful. So let's go back to your early journey to day one. Where was Phil born? And then we'll see where some of these mentors have come into play in your life.
Sure. So I was born and raised in a small town in southwestern Missouri called Neosho. And my mom was a teacher. My dad was a builder. So I'm this mix of academia meets entrepreneurship. And I born and raised in the same house until I was probably 15, 16 years old. And I graduated high school in that town. And then I moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I went to the University of Arkansas, go Hogs, and stayed there most of the next probably 18 years outside of a year or so in Denver, Colorado. And then I moved down here to the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas a few years ago.
Now, what was your favorite memory from your childhood?
Oh, that's a tough one. One of my favorite memories from childhood, it's both a singular memory and one that has multiple around it is, we kind of lived out in the country and everybody out there, we rode bikes. And so I had a coach one time talk about, where did I feel at play, right? As adults, so often we get busy doing things that, where does all the stress roll off? Where is that place that you're just at happy, you're at joy, you're at play? And when I thought back to my childhood, that was always just riding my bike, down the road, down, toward neighbors, to friends' houses, things like that. And so my best memory was always with my brother, with friends, outside riding bikes, probably, heading places that we shouldn't be on people's land or whatever else, getting into a little bit of trouble. But that was always great memories there.
So you've mentioned already a couple of people that have influenced you, your mom, your dad, and then tell me about this coach. Has he impacted your life?
Yeah, so I had a couple of really good coaches. The one I was referencing right there is Tim Brahim. He's a very, very successful mortgage professional entrepreneur. He was a top producer for years, and then went back to school. He had a company called Loan Toolbox that he sold right before the financial crash in the late 2000s. And from my understanding, his story is he kind of went on sabbatical and ended up going and getting his master's in psychology. And he took what he learned in psychology as well as in the mortgage and real estate business and turned that into a coaching company called Performance Experts. And so he and a couple of other coaches on his team were coaches of mine. But I distinctly remember one of the first conversations that we had. It wasn't just about creating business efficiency. It wasn't just about creating lift. It's that journey that we all take between our ears, right, in our own minds. And sometimes we have to put those things together. And so he was a coach that had been very impactful, for me in my professional career. Another one that comes to mind was my very first boss in my industry in the mortgage business. And his name was Tracy. And he was just the guy who taught me the right way to do this business. You know, in mortgage and real estate specifically, there's, you know, the trusted professionals, and then there's kind of that other side. And I was very fortunate to have someone who, you know, taught me the importance of relationships and referral relationships and providing great service and understanding your craft and that education piece I was talking about earlier. So those were a couple of mentors, and you know, a lot of other mentors come in the form of books. I'm a big reader. I read a lot of books. And so sometimes I'll say, you know, one of my coaches told me, or one of my mentors told me, and a lot of times that's me referencing a book or a quote. You know, Jim Rohn, I've consumed a lot of his stuff. He doesn't know it, but he's one of my biggest coaches and influences and mentors. And so, you know, there's, you know, actual people that have made a huge impact and role in my life. And sometimes they're the ones that they may not know how big of an impact they've had on me directly.
That's a great idea as well. Now, coaches and mentors can help us get on the right track and move us away from getting into trouble. But speaking of getting into trouble, what was some of the ways you would get into trouble when you were younger?
So I have a brother who's 6 years older than I am, and you know, as an adult, 6 years isn't that much time. When you're in your youth and teenage years, 6 years is a lot. So I would definitely create some trouble from him because he was older. You know, I could get him to bend to my will, or I would, you know, scream that he had hit me or that he was being mean to me or whatever, and that would get him in trouble pretty quickly. And I was always kind of an explorer. And so, you know, we would always be say, hey, you can, because we lived out in the country on a few acres, and there was always fences everywhere. And okay, don't cross that fence. Don't go to that land. Well, you know, you tell somebody not to do something, what are they going to do? That's the first thing they're going to go do. So I was a little bit of an explorer that way. And I think the maddest my dad ever was at me is he had an old antique tractor. And again, we lived on a few acres and it was mowed right in the middle. We still had a lot of oak trees and stuff, but the sides of the land were just brush that wasn't grass. It was just really, really thick. And he had this antique tractor that was sitting at the edge of where the mowed part was. And on the edge of the tractor, it came out, these lights just sat out there. And I mean, with a boy with a BB gun or a pellet gun, those were the perfect targets to shoot across there. And I didn't know that it wasn't just a piece of junk sitting there. And I shot out the lights in that antique tractor. And he was just, it was super expensive to replace. He was in the process of restoring that tractor, is what I didn't know. And so I'd always find something to get into, some trouble to get into as a kid.
Wonderful. Now, I asked you where you were born, but do you remember the moment where you were born and got into the driver's seat of the life? Because a lot of us, you know, we come into this world, we're dependent on other people. Was there a moment where you got into the driver's seat towards the success you've had now?
Yeah, I actually remember a couple of moments, but one that I'll share is early on, before I'd gotten into mortgage and real estate industry, I did a little bit of network marketing and multi-level marketing and things like that. And at a conference, I got to hear John Maxwell speak. And you know, John Maxwell, as everybody knows, is one of the foremost authorities in all things leadership and personal development. And I had read his book, 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader. And he talked about that your talent can take you where your character can't keep you. And it's super important that us as people, you know, are the whole package. And I heard him speak there. It was actually, I've actually met him since then, and I've seen him speak several times, but I was in a Coliseum in either North or South Carolina. I don't remember exactly which. And I heard him talk, and he's talked so many times. And even since then, the thing was super impactful is he doesn't just give a canned speech. Every single time he's very deliberate and intentional. And it's typically material that's really come to him, inspired him in the last, you know, few days or in recent time. And I just remember everybody else just kind of fading away and really kind of honing into him. And I was young. You know, even though I had a dad who was a business owner, a mom who was a teacher, and I felt like I had a lot of head knowledge, there was something that happened at that conference. And I learned about this education, this entrepreneurship, this business mindset it was a world that had opened up that I didn't know existed. Now, I didn't continue to do the network marketing or multi-level marketing company, but there was a point there that I realized, hey, a lot of this activity, a lot of this knowledge, a lot of these principles, if you will, those are going to be applicable in almost every area of my life. And I tell everybody that I coach and even mentors, as I've had conversations with people, there's a set of success principles that all truly successful people understand. And it's not like that there's this finite list. It's just abstract concepts that people understand, and not just business success, but success in your relationships and in your health and in your family and all the areas that we want to thrive in life. And I think that as soon as we understand those or figure those out for ourselves, by default, we'll have success in those areas of our life. And so I think that's one reason that, education and learning and having other people share that wisdom between each other, I think that's why that's been super important and impactful in my life. Is all I'm looking for is that secret sauce. And again, it's not just one list, because even if someone wrote a list of 10 or 15 or 100 things, that might mean something different for you in your life than it would for me. And so, though that's just kind of how I'm wired and how I approach this crazy thing we call the business world.
Mm-hmm. So now you're picking up momentum towards your today's success, let's say, where you are. And you mentioned ideas are great, planning is better, but execution is the best, or the key
That's all
thing.
that matters. Yeah.
When did you start executing towards the mortgage side of business?
I mean, there's a couple of phases there in the industry. So the first part of my career was me as a loan officer, as an originator, actually doing individual home loans. And I was thrown to the deep end of the pool almost immediately. I did a few days of classroom style training from that mentor that I was telling you about. He took a day where he kind of showed me how he talked to some of his referral partners. And that next Monday I came in and there was a big box of photocopied flyers, and he handed it to me and said, go talk to realtors or whoever and have them send you business. And so it took me about a month, but I did it the hard way. If I'll say, I did a lot of cold calling. I did a lot of, walking into real estate offices and starting conversations with people. I didn't necessarily understand the marketing side of things. It was always sales, because I say a lot that, marketing is what gets someone's attention. It's sales that makes them a customer. And they're two very different things. So many times we think we're marketing when really we're just trying to sell. There's that call to action there. Marketing your business can be getting someone's attention that has absolutely nothing to do with your business. It can be just offering value or entertainment to someone that makes them aware of you and your brand. And so, early on, it was me getting results in that sense. And then later in my career, it was, I think it's Einstein that says something to the effect of, you don't really know something until you try to teach someone else. And so, that phase of my career was, okay, I know how to go, build a business and do loans, but am I able to help other people do that? Am I able to build teams? And then it was, okay, how do I attract other mortgage professionals to me? How do I get their attention as opposed to just consumers or realtors and referral partners? And so that was there's two kind of phases of my career. And this last few years, as I focused on, podcasting and speaking and marketing and social media and the content side of things, I don't think you ever fully make it, but I think that I've had some success along the way to where I understand a little bit about how this whole thing works. So I don't know if that's a direct answer to your question, but that's kind of top of mind.
So you mentioned a couple of skills that you picked up, but what would you say the biggest skill that has helped you along your journey?
From a tangible skills standpoint, I would say having conversations with people, ability to communicate. And that's something I've worked very hard on, but you can put me in a public place where I don't know a soul and I can make friends pretty quickly. I can start conversations with folks. I can find a way to relate with people. So from a tangible standpoint, I would say the skill of communication. I don't care what kind of business you're in. If you're an effective communicator in person, in social media, in traditional media, you're going to have a lot easier time and a lot better path toward the success that you're trying to achieve. And I think from an intangible standpoint, something that I work hard at, maybe not necessarily something I've mastered, but is self-awareness. And that's really straight from Gary Vaynerchuk. I had an opportunity to interview him on my podcast but just consuming his content, he talks a lot about self-awareness. We need to understand what we're good at and what we're not. And I think a lot of people want to identify that of, well, I'm not good at this, so I want to try to get better. And he kind of flips that paradigm. It's the stuff that you're not good at, go find people that are, that you can partner with and collaborate with, and then go deep with what you're good at. And I think that with me, it's one of the reasons I started a podcast is I like talking to people. I like having conversations like this. I'm not necessarily the best on video. I'm not super dynamic. I'm not necessarily creative in that sense of, the types of videos that people do. And so I think, being self-aware is super important for people to know what their lane is and just be honest with themselves about things that's not necessarily something they're as strong at.
You mentioned being good at communication. Was this something that's closer to your personality, that you were always had that, or did you have to specifically develop it in any?
Both. I was telling someone the other day, I remember all the way back to elementary school and parent teacher conferences. I always got good grades and I was always super collaborative, but there was always talks a lot was always written in the columns in there. And so I've always been a talker. It was always a negative thing until it wasn't. And now all of a sudden being able to talk a lot and interact with people is a positive scent and suits me well. So it's in my nature, but I spend a lot of time with Rene Rodriguez is a great friend and mentor. He has Amplify, and he's done a couple of TEDx talks, and he talks a lot about communicating, not just in a public speaking forum, but what is your pathos, ethos, and logos? What is how do you get when the nerves come in? How do you go from system 1 to system 2? He's systemized, for lack of a better word, communication and how to do it better and how to understand what people need from you and dialogue to keep those conversations going. And so in addition to, I think, talking and having a lot of practice at trying to communicate is something that's in my nature, because I was self-aware of, hey, that is in some way, shape, or form strength of mine. How do I continue to do that better? And so, that's something that I've done a lot of research on and education on too.
Mm-hmm. Now, I asked you, how did you get into trouble when you were younger? As a professional and with your awareness, have you noticed some ways you get into trouble as far as, like self-sabotage or whatever you want to call it?
Sure. So two things. And this is just being super transparent. The two ways, not just me, but I think a lot of professionals get themselves into trouble is saying yes too much. No is a very, very powerful word. We put too much on our plates and we don't effectively execute on the things that we've said yes to. And so no is a very, very powerful word. And I know that like Darren Hardy, who's written books and was, the editor-in-chief, I think, for Entrepreneur Magazine, he says no to almost everything. He talks about the 80-20 principle, and then of that 20%, do an 80-20 of that, and then maybe going even further. And he says no to almost everything because he focuses just super deliberately on those things. The other thing in the business world, at least especially in my industry, and something that you have to be aware of is mixing alcohol into conversations or in business events, like happy hours, like it's a social thing. And so I know that there's been times for me that, a company's President's Club trip where we're all drinking and hanging out of the pool, and then all of a sudden you just had too many and you turn a little bit sloppy. And not that there was anything really terrible or inappropriate that happened, but how we show up as professionals is super important. Yeah. And so, not just putting too much on our plate to where we're not delivering to our full capacity. It's sometimes something as basic as self-sabotage of, you want to have a glass of wine, you want to have a cocktail, you want to have a couple of beers. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not having a stance on alcohol one way or another, but I'm saying when you're talking about business, you need to understand your objectives. And it goes back to that self-awareness. At what point does a cocktail or two turn into I'm saying too much, I'm making a fool of myself, and everything that I've done constructively all day was just undone in this last half hour because I made a fool of myself.
Yes, thank you.
And that's something that I've done in the past before. So that's why I say that's a point that, I know that from experience of, hey, you just don't want to do that.
Thank you for that transparency. It's really powerful. Now let's go to that zone of genius. You said yourself, you have clients yourself that you coach, mentor yourself. who are the people that are attracted to working with you? Like who's ready to step up?
Yes, that's a great question. So I've had individual coaching clients. I've also had people that because I'm still a director, sales innovation strategy director for a mortgage company. So I have people in branches that are employees that either that report to me or report to other departments that I'll coach. But the people that I seem to attract to me are people that are like me. And I tell that to everybody. If you're creating content for social media, if you're marketing, if you're selling, be authentic, be real to who you are, because you will attract people to you like you are. That's your tribe. That's the people you want to do business with. So often, and I see this probably a lot more in the real estate community, even than the mortgage community, is, real estate professionals tend to want to go out a specific type of property or a specific neighborhood or geographic area, but that may not necessarily be the right fit stylistically or personality wise or background. Not that you can't go after those things, but understand you want to attract people to you like you are. That's a positive thing. That's where you're going to get the most effectiveness and efficiency. So it's the same way with me. I think people that have some marketing and sales that they're wanting to do, and through mistakes and things that I've done well at, I can help coach and teach them. I also think that where a lot of traditional coaches in my industry are either coaching on the tactical numbers of how to do more units, do more volume, get growth, or you have them and they understand the mortgage industry in detail, or you have the ones that are more high level, philosophical, marketing, branding, that's not necessarily tailored specifically to my industry. Where I think I'm a little bit unique is I've been doing this 17 years, but I'm still a young guy. So I understand the old way of doing it and kind of where the industry is going. But I also both know the tactical on the ground, how to build the mortgage industry, build a business there. And then I've spent a lot of time learning and participating in the higher level branding and marketing side of the equation. So we're a lot of coaches, not that every coach isn't, that is one dimensional or isn't multidimensional. I think that's where the people that I'm attracting to me, they want the fact that I can help them with their conversion on the tactical real estate and mortgage side, as well as, let's talk about some, Facebook ads or conversion on social media or some of the things that may not necessarily always fit directly into the mortgage space.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you able to brag about one of your clients or a couple of them?
Sure. It's a former employee of mine. She started out when I hired her, doing about $6 million in volume a year, about $500,000 a month. So a couple of units, not a couple of families. And within about 24, 36 months, she was doing about 36 million a year, had multiple team members. And, so I can't take all the credit. Obviously, she did the work. But the thing I use her as an example a lot is whenever we would sit down once a month or every few weeks or every quarter, later on down the road, every time we sat down and had some type of a coaching session or a one-on-one, she would say, okay, here's what I'm doing. What's next? And when we would add something in, she would always add that in. So many people, when they go, what's next? They stop doing what they've been doing and focus on this new thing. And she was a great student in a sense that she did this stuff and then she added the next thing in and continued to do all of it. And she added something else on top of it. And we added team members in and we created systems and efficiencies. But that's the one that always has kind of stood out for me is, she was as much of a good student as I tried to be as a coach or a mentor. And, she did the work. So it's the credit's hers. But as far as a success story, 6Xing your business in 24, 36 months is something that I was pretty proud of.
That's amazing. Now, working with many different people, have you noticed a certain pattern of people struggling with like certain similarities?
Yes. A lot of times it's something as simple as they're not willing to do the work. You can't fake this. People that look for shortcuts or people that want to know the secrets, mentally, they're not ready for the success. Because if you ask anyone who's had any success in business, and I'm a small fish, right? There's a lot of people that have had a lot of success, both in my industry and others, but anybody that's made any money, that's had any achievements at all, everyone will tell you it is, I worked really, really hard over a period of time. I stayed consistent and persistent over time, and that's how I won. And when things weren't working, I adjusted. I don't like to use the word pivot, because I think with a pivot, it gives you the visual that someone's standing in one place. Like when a basketball player has a foot planted, they just pivot. Yeah. Well, they're not really going anywhere. They're kind of going in circles. So shifted direction, I think is probably more apt what I would like to use. But I think that people that aren't willing to do the work and then be patient, that's a characteristic of someone who, isn't going to have some success. There are no shortcuts. There are some things where it may have a little less resistance, may have a little easier road, but I don't care if you have this really cool platform that no one else is using and you have this huge competitive advantage. You still have to do the work. It may be a different kind of work. Maybe it's an easier work, but you still have to do the work over time and be consistent and persistent.
Wonderful. Last question, Phil. You've mentioned that ideas are great, that planning is better, and that execution is the key. So what is your idea going forward? What are you planning, and what are you executing in the next decade, let's say, or looking forward?
That's a great question. I think the only reason that I'm not going to struggle with this question is we did a company summit a couple of days ago, and a similar question was asked. So I'm going to give the same answer. I am right now, especially as a podcaster, am very, very intrigued and bullish and excited about audio and voice technology. Podcasting has been around for a while. It's really starting to gain traction across all industries, not just the one that I'm in. But when you think about smart speakers like Amazon Alexa and other devices, and you think about how they're getting added to not just mobile devices, but cars and things of that nature, as well as the advent of this new social media app Clubhouse, that's been around about a year, we're teaching people to live their lives in a more audio and voice driven society. And it's super powerful because you can do multiple things, right? Video is the most engaging type of content in a marketing platform, but it's done for a lot longer. The average video view on social media is in the seconds, and the average video view on like YouTube is a minute or two, where most people on the podcast, the average time that they listen to an episode is for sure over half, but close to 80-90% of the episode. And I share that with people because we can do multiple things with audio and voice. We don't have to be fixed on one thing. So that's what the ideas that I have rolling around in my head are: how do we use voice and apply it to mortgage and real estate? How do we, if you think of an iPhone or an Android, a smartphone is a platform, and the applications on it are the businesses that are built on that platform. Some of the biggest companies on planet Earth have been built as an app or a business on that platform. I think these smart speakers are the next platform that we can build all type of cool technology, and Amazon, I think the word is skill. There's a lot of things we can do. So I'm thinking about that, trying to make plans and hopefully executing on being one of the first in mortgage and real estate to achieve something, substantial and meaningful in a voice and audio platform.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm cheering you on. Phil, thank you very much for your time. Where can people follow you and connect with you?
Across social media, I'm pretty easy to find. It's just at Phil Treadwell. Website's philtreadwell.com. My podcast is called Mortgage Marketing Expert. You can find that on pretty much every major podcast platform out there, or the website is just mmepodcast.com. So I appreciate you giving me the platform. This has been a lot of fun.
I appreciate your time, man.